Blake Turner despised blind dates more than anything. But his mother had played the "I gave birth to you" card that always worked, even on a 33-year-old self-made shipping magnate worth over $300 million. The text message from his mother contained nothing but a restaurant name, a time, and the smiling emoji that Blake found particularly manipulative. He grumbled as he parked his understated Audi in front of Celestial, the city's newest upscale restaurant, 15 minutes late on purpose. "Just one drink," Blake muttered to himself as he reluctantly stepped out of his car. "Then I'll make up an emergency and leave." The hostess recognized him immediately, her eyes widening. "Mr. Turner, your guest is already seated, right this way." Blake followed, mentally rehearsing his emergency exit strategy. Something about a shipping container crisis in Rotterdam just specific enough to sound legitimate. When the hostess stopped at a table near the back, Blake almost stumbled. The woman waiting wasn't at all what he expected. His mother typically chose polished socialites who resembled fashion models with business degrees. This woman was different. Her curly auburn hair was piled haphazardly on top of her head, and she wore a simple green dress that brought out her eyes rather than screamed designer label. "Mr. Turner, this is Miss Grayson," the hostess said. The woman looked up from her book, an actual paperback in a restaurant, and offered a small smile. "It's Sophia, and you must be the reluctant blind date." Blake felt something shift inside him. "How did you know I was reluctant?" "You're 15 minutes late. Your tie is slightly crooked, like you put it on in a hurry, and you've checked your watch twice since you arrived at the table." She closed her book. "It's okay. I'm not thrilled to be here either." Blake sat down, genuinely intrigued for the first time. "So why are you? Your mother can be very persuasive. Tell me about it," Blake sighed, relaxing slightly. "She practically birthed me again to get me here tonight." Sophia laughed, a genuine sound that made the couple at the next table turn and smile. "She told me you'd say something like that." For the first time in years, Blake felt like he was in uncharted territory. He was used to women who knew exactly who he was, what he was worth, and how to impress him. Sophia Grayson seemed refreshingly unimpressed. "So, what's your emergency?" she asked casually. Blake blinked. "What?" "Your emergency. The one you plan to use to escape this date within the first 30 minutes. She sipped her water. "Mine was going to be a work crisis involving a client, but I'm willing to set it aside if you are." Blake actually laughed. "Rotterdam, shipping container crisis." "Ah, specific. Good choice." Sophia nodded approvingly. Blake picked up the menu but couldn't stop glancing at Sophia. "So how exactly do you know my mother?" "I don't, not really. I work with the Glendale Children's Foundation. Your mother is on the board. Apparently she's been watching me at events for months, deciding if I was worthy of her precious son." Sophia rolled her eyes. "Her words, not mine." "That sounds like Millionaire Turner," Blake admitted. "I apologize for her. Everything. No need, she's quite something though. Told me you were, and I quote, brilliant but emotionally constipated." Blake choked on his water. "She didn't." "She absolutely did," Sophia confirmed with another of those genuine laughs. "I almost declined right then, but she mentioned you funded that new pediatric wing at Mercy Hospital, and I got curious about what kind of man does something like that." Blake shifted uncomfortably. He hated when people brought up his charitable work. It always felt like they were trying to compliment him for doing what any decent person with money should do. "It was nothing. Tax write-off." Sophia studied him for a moment. "Liar." The server approached before Blake could respond, asking if they were ready to order. Blake realized he hadn't even looked at the menu. For the first time in years, he'd been too distracted by his dinner companion. "I'll have the sea base," Sophia said. "Make that too," Blake added, handing back the menu. After the server left, he leaned forward. "So, what does Sophia Grayson do at the Glendale Children's Foundation when she's not being ambushed into blind dates?" "I'm their legal counsel," she replied. "Nonprofit law. Exciting stuff like grant compliance and corporate structure reviews." "That actually sounds interesting," Blake said, surprised to find he meant it. "It can be," she agreed. "Though sometimes I miss the adrenaline of my previous firm, but representing organizations that help children feels more meaningful than helping rich people get richer." Blake raised an eyebrow. "You do realize you're on a date with one of those rich people? Are we calling this a date now? I thought it was a maternal hostage situation." Her eyes twinkled with amusement. "And yes, I'm aware of who you are, Blake Turner. Shipping magnate, Fortune 500 list maker, and apparently reluctant philanthropist. You've done your research. Google is free, and I never go anywhere unprepared." Their appetizers arrived, a dish Blake didn't remember ordering but assumed was his mother's doing. The conversation flowed easily as they ate, moving from work to books to travel. Blake found himself genuinely laughing at Sophia's dry observations about her recent trip to Spain. "So," Sophia said as they waited for their main course, "your mother mentioned you've been single for 2 years. Busy with work or commitment issues?" Blake nearly choked on his wine. "Direct, aren't you? Life's too short for games. Besides, your mother already told me you have commitment issues stemming from your college girlfriend who cheated with your roommate. I'm just confirming." "I'm going to kill her," Blake muttered, but without real malice. "For the record, I don't have commitment issues. I have issues with committing to the wrong people. There's a difference." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough. And to save you the awkward asking, I've been single for 8 months. Previous relationship ended because we wanted different things." "Different things?" "He wanted someone who would quit her job when he got promoted to Boston. I wanted someone who wouldn't ask me to quit my job when he got promoted to Boston." She shrugged. "Irreconcilable differences." Blake felt a surge of respect. "His loss." "Absolutely his loss," she agreed with a grin. "Now he's freezing in Boston, and I'm having dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in the city." The main course arrived, and Blake was surprised to discover he'd completely forgotten about his planned emergency exit. When Sophia excused herself to the restroom, he checked his phone to find 3 texts from his mother. "How's it going? Is she perfect or what? Do not mess this up, Blake." Blake rolled his eyes but couldn't help smiling. For once, his mother's meddling might not have been completely misguided. When Sophia returned, he noticed the simple silver bracelet on her wrist that he hadn't seen before. "Nice bracelet. Thanks, it was my grandmother's." She touched it absently. "I always carry it in my purse for luck, figured I might need some tonight. And has it brought you luck?" Sophia tilted her head, studying him with those remarkable green eyes. "The jury's still out. Ask me again at the end of dinner." 2 hours later, after dessert and coffee, Blake walked Sophia to her car, a sensible Honda that had seen better days. "This is me," she said, stopping beside it. "Thanks for dinner, it was surprisingly not terrible," Blake laughed. "High praise, I'm honored. You should be. My last blind date spent 45 minutes talking about cryptocurrency before I fake fainted to escape." "Fake fainted? That's commitment to an exit strategy." "Go big or go home," she said with a shrug. They stood there for a moment, the night air crisp around them. Blake realized he didn't want the evening to end. "So," he said, uncharacteristically uncertain, "would you consider doing this again sometime, without my mother's orchestration?" Sophia pretended to consider, tapping her finger against her chin. "I don't know. Will there be another shipping container crisis in Rotterdam? I can't make any promises, but I'll try to keep the international commerce emergencies to a minimum." "In that case." She pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to him. "Yes, I'd like that." Blake took the card, his fingers brushing against hers. "I'll call you tomorrow." "Not too early," she warned. "I'm not a morning person." "Noted," he said, smiling. As she got into her car, Sophia rolled down the window. "Oh, and Blake, tell your mother she was right, but maybe not right away. She seems like the type who would become insufferable about it." Blake laughed. "You've got her number already." As he watched her drive away, Blake pulled out his phone and sent a single text to his mother. "You win this round." The response came immediately. "Of course I did. I'm your mother." Blake smiled as he walked back to his own car, Sophia's business card held carefully between his fingers. For the first time in years, he was actually looking forward to a second date. True to his word, Blake called Sophia the next day at a respectable 1 in the afternoon. "Blake Turner," she answered, skipping hello. "I was wondering if you'd actually call." "I said I would," he replied, oddly pleased she'd saved his number. "I was calling to see if you'd like to have dinner again. Tomorrow night." There was a pause. "That's awfully soon. Eager are we?" "Just efficient," he countered, though she wasn't wrong. "I have a busy schedule." "Ah, the shipping empire waits for no man," something like that. Blake found himself smiling into the phone. "Is that a yes or a no?" "It's a yes," Sophia said. "But this time I choose the place. Not all of us can afford Celestial twice in 1 week." "Deal," Blake agreed, ignoring the fact that he could probably buy the restaurant if he wanted to. "Text me the details." "Will do, and Blake, wear something casual, not whatever passes for casual in your world. Actual casual. Jeans, t-shirt." "I own jeans," he protested. "Sure you do." "See you tomorrow." The call ended, and Blake stared at his phone, still smiling. Then he opened his closet and frowned. Did he actually own jeans? The following evening, Blake found himself outside a small pizzeria in a neighborhood he rarely visited. He'd had to ask his driver to take him, as he wasn't even sure where it was. He wore dark jeans, newly purchased, and a simple button-down shirt, the closest thing to a T-shirt he could bring himself to wear. Sophia was waiting outside, wearing jeans and a blue sweater that made her hair look even more vibrantly red in the evening light. She broke into a grin when she saw him. "You actually wore jeans. I'm impressed." Blake tugged at them self-consciously. "As requested. Though I draw the line at T-shirts." "Baby steps," she said, leading him into the restaurant. "This place makes the best pizza in the city. It's a well-kept secret." The restaurant was small, just a dozen tables and packed with people. It was noisy, casual, and nothing like the upscale establishments Blake typically frequented. Yet as they were seated at a small corner table, Blake found himself enjoying the atmosphere. "I come here at least once a week," Sophia explained as she greeted the server by name. "Marco's parents opened this place 30 years ago. He took over when they retired." "Regular customer perks," Blake observed as Marco brought them a bottle of wine without being asked. "The usual, Sophia?" Marco asked. "Yes, but make it a large tonight." "I have a feeling Blake here has a healthy appetite." Marco nodded approvingly. "Good, too skinny this one." Blake raised an eyebrow as Marco walked away. "Too skinny. Ignore him. He thinks everyone's too skinny." Sophia poured them each a glass of wine. "So, tell me something your mother wouldn't know about you." "That's an interesting request," Blake said, considering. "Something my mother wouldn't know. And make it good. Nothing boring like your favorite color." Blake took a sip of wine, then said, "I almost quit the company 3 years ago." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. "Really? Why?" "I was burned out. Working 80-hour weeks, dealing with a global supply chain crisis. One day I just sat in my office and drafted a resignation letter." He shook his head at the memory. "I was going to buy a boat and sail around the world." "What stopped you?" My CFO had a heart attack the next day. Not serious, thankfully, but enough to scare everyone. I couldn't leave with the company in chaos, so I stayed to stabilize things. Blake shrugged. And then, I just never left. You regret it? Sophia asked, her head tilted in genuine curiosity. Blake had never been asked that question before. Sometimes, but I've made changes since then. Better work-life balance, more delegation. The sailing trip is still on my list, just postponed. Life has a way of doing that, Sophia agreed. Postponing our dreams. Your turn, Blake said. Tell me something no one knows about you. Sophia twirled her wine glass thoughtfully. I was almost an Olympic swimmer. Really? Blake couldn't hide his surprise. Don't look so shocked, she laughed. I was nationally ranked in high school, had scholarship offers from top programs. I was on track for Olympic trials. What happened? Shoulder injury my senior year. Nothing dramatic, just overuse. By the time it healed, I'd started college and gotten involved in pre-law programs. She shrugged. Different path. Any regrets? Not about that. I love what I do now, she smiled. Though sometimes when I swim laps, I wonder what might have been. Their pizza arrived, a magnificent creation, topped with ingredients Blake couldn't even identify. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine as they ate. Blake realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd enjoyed a meal this much or company this engaging. So, Sophia said as they worked their way through the pizza, your mother told me you're some kind of genius when it comes to logistics. Blake groaned. What else did she tell you? That you built your first shipping model with Legos when you were 8. That you multiplied your inheritance by 20 in just 5 years. That you're wasting your good looks and fortune by working too much. Sophia ticked off the points on her fingers. Should I continue? Please don't, Blake said, mortified yet amused. Though the Lego part is true. I was obsessed with efficiency even then. It's impressive what you've built, Sophia said, suddenly serious. Turner Shipping is known for treating workers fairly. That's rare in your industry. Blake felt uncomfortable with the praise. It's just good business. Happy workers are productive workers. No, it's more than that. I've seen the charitable foundation work. You fund educational initiatives in every port city where you operate. She studied him. That's not just good business, that's good humanity. Blake felt his face warming and changed the subject. How did you get into non-profit law? Sophia allowed the deflection. My parents were both teachers in underfunded schools. I grew up seeing how much difference even small resources could make. When I finished law school, I had offers from corporate firms, better money, prestige, but it never felt right. So you chose meaning over money. I chose both, just in different proportions, she corrected. I make a good living, not private jet good, but comfortable, and I sleep well at night. Sleep is overrated, Blake joked, says the man who probably has a king-sized bed with 1,000-count Egyptian cotton sheets. 1,500 actually, Blake admitted sheepishly. Sophia laughed, the sound drawing smiles from nearby tables. Of course they are. After they finished, Blake insisted on paying despite Sophia's protests. As they walked outside, the night had turned chilly. Without thinking, Blake removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. Very gentlemanly, she commented, pulling it closer. Thank you. Where's your car? Blake asked, looking around the crowded street. I took the subway. My apartment's not far. Let me drive you home, Blake offered immediately. Sophia raised an eyebrow. With what car? I don't see a $300,000 sports car anywhere. I have a car service, Blake admitted. One text and they'll be here in 5 minutes. Of course you do, she laughed. But no, let's walk. It's a nice night. Before Blake could protest, Sophia linked her arm through his and began leading him down the street. The contact was casual but sent a surprising jolt through him. As they walked, Sophia pointed out her favorite spots in the neighborhood: a tiny bookstore, a cafe where she worked sometimes, a park where she ran on weekends. Blake found himself seeing the city through new eyes. He'd lived here for years but realized he'd experienced very little of it. "This is me," Sophia said eventually, stopping in front of a modest apartment building. It was well maintained but certainly not luxury living. "I had a great time," Blake said, suddenly feeling like a teenager at the end of a first date. "Me too." "Much better than I expected," Sophia admitted with a smile. She slipped off his jacket and handed it back. "Thank you for indulging my pizza obsession. It was delicious, best I've ever had." High praise from a man who could probably fly in pizza from Naples on a whim. Blake laughed. "I'm not that ridiculous. Just checking." She looked at him for a moment, then made a decision. Standing on her tiptoes, she pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Blake Turner." Before he could respond, she was heading up the steps to her building. At the door, she turned back. "I'm free on Saturday, by the way, if you're interested in a third date." Blake found himself nodding. "Saturday, definitely." Her smile was the last thing he saw before the door closed behind her. On the ride back to his penthouse, Blake found himself touching the spot on his cheek where Sophia had kissed him. It had been such a simple gesture, yet it felt more significant than many of his past relationships. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. How was pizza with Sophia? Blake stared at the screen. How did she know? Had she been spying on him? More likely, she and Sophia had been texting. The thought bothered him less than it probably should have. "Fine," he texted back, not willing to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much he was enjoying Sophia's company. 3 dots appeared then. "Just fine. She's perfect for you, Blake. Don't mess this up." Blake put his phone away without responding. His mother was right, though he'd never admit it to her face. There was something about Sophia Grayson that intrigued him more than anyone had in years. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. When Saturday arrived, Blake found himself in the unusual position of being nervous. He'd chosen an activity he hoped would surprise Sophia: tickets to the City Symphony's special movie-themed performance. They were playing scores from famous films while scenes projected on a giant screen above the orchestra. He picked her up in his Audi, driving himself, which he rarely did in the city. When she emerged from her building, she wore a simple dark blue dress that made his breath catch. Her hair was down tonight, falling in waves around her shoulders. "You look beautiful," he said as she slid into the passenger seat. "Thank you," she replied, seeming genuinely pleased. "You clean up nicely yourself, though I'm beginning to think your entire wardrobe consists of tailored suits." "Not true," Blake protested as he pulled into traffic. "I wore jeans on our last date. Brand new jeans that probably cost more than my monthly rent," she teased. "Where are we going tonight?" "It's a surprise," Blake said, enjoying her curious expression. "But I think you'll like it." When they arrived at the concert hall, Sophia's eyes lit up. "The film score concert. I've been wanting to see this." "I know," Blake admitted. "I may have asked Marco what you like." "Sneaky," she said approvingly. "I'm impressed." Their seats were perfect center orchestra, with an unobstructed view of both the musicians and the screen. As the lights dimmed and the first notes of the Star Wars theme filled the hall, Blake found himself watching Sophia more than the performance. Her face was animated with joy, occasionally mouthing words along with the film clips. During intermission, they strolled through the lobby, champagne in hand. "How did you get these seats?" Sophia asked. "This show has been sold out for months." "The conductor is on the board of a charity I support," Blake explained. "When I called, he happened to have 2 tickets set aside." "Ah, the perks of being Blake Turner," Sophia said, but without judgment. "Well, I'm benefiting from it tonight, so I won't complain." "Do you like classical music?" Blake asked. I do. My parents insisted on piano lessons from age 6 to 16. I was mediocre at best, but it gave me an appreciation for music. She sipped her champagne. What about you? Similar story minus the lessons. My father loved classical music. It was always playing in our house. Blake felt a familiar pang when thinking about his father, who had died when Blake was in college. These film scores would have made him happy. He thought film composers were the classical musicians of our time. He sounds like a wise man, Sophia said softly. He was. When the lights flickered, signaling the end of intermission, Sophia surprised Blake by taking his hand as they returned to their seats. She held it throughout the second half, her thumb occasionally brushing across his knuckles in a way that made it difficult for him to concentrate on anything else. After the concert, they had dinner at a small French restaurant nearby. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from topic to topic. Blake found himself sharing stories he rarely told anyone about the early days of taking over his father's company, about the mistakes he'd made, about his dreams for the future. "You're not what I expected," Sophia admitted as they shared a chocolate dessert. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more. Arrogant, I suppose. Less thoughtful." She shrugged. "The millionaires I've met through foundation work are usually more interested in the tax benefits of charity than the actual cause." "I was probably like that once," Blake admitted. "Success at a young age went to my head for a while." "What changed you?" Blake considered the question. 5 years ago, I visited one of our shipping facilities in Southeast Asia. Conditions were terrible. I had no idea. My local managers had been hiding it from corporate. I saw families living in slums right outside our facility, children who should have been in school working to help their parents. He paused, the memory still affecting him. "I fired the entire management team that day. Spent 3 months personally overseeing the rebuilding of that facility. Started our education foundation. It changed my perspective." Sophia reached across the table and took his hand. "That explains a lot about you." "What about you?" Blake asked, turning the focus away from himself. "What changed you? What makes you think I've changed?" "Everyone changes," Blake said simply. "Life shapes us." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "When I was in law school, I interned at a high-powered firm. All the partners were wealthy, successful. I thought that's what I wanted. Then I was assigned to help on a case where our client, a large corporation, was fighting a wrongful termination suit from a woman who'd been fired after her child was diagnosed with cancer." She took a sip of wine before continuing. "She needed flexibility for hospital visits. The company refused. Completely legal but morally bankrupt, and there I was helping them win." She shook her head. "I quit the next day, changed my focus to nonprofit law, never looked back." "That took courage," Blake said, impressed. "Or stubbornness," she replied with a small smile. "My parents certainly thought so." As the evening wound down, Blake drove Sophia home, both of them reluctant for the night to end. When he walked her to her door, there was a moment of hesitation, a charged silence filled with possibility. "I had a wonderful time," Sophia said softly. "So did I." Blake stepped closer. "Can I see you again? I'd like that." Blake reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned in. Their first kiss was gentle, questioning. When Sophia's arms slid around his neck, pulling him closer, the kiss deepened, becoming something more. Blake felt a rush of emotion he hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Sophia smiled up at him. "Well, that was worth waiting for." Blake laughed softly. "Agreed. Call me tomorrow, count on it." With one more quick kiss, Sophia disappeared into her building, leaving Blake standing on the steps, feeling like his world had shifted on its axis. Over the next few weeks, Blake and Sophia saw each other regularly. They fell into a rhythm of dinner dates, museum visits, and quiet evenings at her apartment watching movies. Blake found himself rearranging his schedule to make more time for her, delegating tasks he would normally handle personally. 1 month into their relationship, Blake invited Sophia to his penthouse for the first time. He'd been hesitant, not wanting her to think he was showing off his wealth, but it felt strange to never host her. When she stepped off the elevator directly into his foyer, her eyes widened as she took in the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline. "Wow," she said simply. "This view is incredible." "The real estate agent said it was the selling point," Blake replied, suddenly self-conscious about the obviously expensive space. Sophia wandered through the open-concept living area, running her fingers along the grand piano that had belonged to his father. "Do you play?" "Poorly," he admitted. "It was my father's. I keep it tuned but rarely touch it." She sat down on the bench and played a few simple chords. "May I, please?" Blake encouraged, pouring them each a glass of wine. Sophia began playing, her fingers moving confidently across the keys. The melody was familiar, something classical that Blake recognized but couldn't name. She played for several minutes, her face serene in concentration. When she finished, Blake applauded softly. "You said you were mediocre. That was beautiful." "I've improved since I was 16, she admitted with a smile. "It relaxes me. I have a keyboard in my apartment, not nearly as nice as this, but it does the job." Blake handed her a glass of wine. "You're full of surprises, Sophia Grayson. I try to keep things interesting." She took the glass and followed him to the sofa. As they sat, she noticed the built-in bookshelves filled with volumes. "You're a reader." "Whenever I can find the time," Blake confirmed, "which isn't as often as I'd like." Sophia set down her wine and walked to the shelves, examining the titles. "First editions?" she asked, noting the quality of some of the bindings. "Some of them. My father collected them. I've added a few of my own over the years." Sophia carefully pulled out a volume of poetry. "Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I wouldn't have guessed you for a poetry lover." "There's a lot you don't know about me yet," Blake said, joining her by the shelves. "I'm learning," she replied, looking up at him with a smile that made his heart race. Blake took the book from her hands, set it aside, and pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was deeper this time, filled with a month's worth of growing feelings. Sophia's hands slid up his chest and around his neck as she pressed against him. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Blake rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you, Sophia. Hard and fast." "I know the feeling," she whispered back. "It's terrifying." "Completely," he agreed. "And wonderful." They spent the evening cooking dinner together in his rarely used kitchen, laughing as Blake proved himself nearly useless with a knife. After dinner, they moved to the balcony, wrapped in blankets against the early autumn chill, talking until well past midnight. When Sophia finally said she should go, Blake called his driver to take her home, walking her down to the lobby. "Stay," he said impulsively as they waited for the car. "Not for, I mean I have guest rooms, it's late." Sophia smiled and kissed him softly. "Another time, I have an early meeting tomorrow." Blake nodded, understanding but disappointed. "I'll call you tomorrow." "You better," she replied, kissing him once more before sliding into the car. Blake watched until the car disappeared around the corner, then went back upstairs to his penthouse that suddenly felt emptier than it had before. 2 days later, Blake was in his office reviewing quarterly projections when his assistant interrupted. "Mr. Turner, your mother is here to see you." Blake sighed. "Send her in." Eleanor Turner swept into the office like she owned it, immaculately dressed as always. At 62, she remained a striking woman, her gray hair cut in a stylish bob that framed her sharp features. "Blake, darling," she said, kissing his cheek before taking a seat across from his desk. "You've been avoiding me." "I've been busy, Mother." "Too busy to tell your own mother about your new relationship." She raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "I had to hear about your concert date from Judith Lawrence, who serves on the symphony board with me." Blake rubbed his temples. "I was going to tell you." "When? After you proposed?" His mother waved dismissively. "No matter. I'm just thrilled it's working out with Sophia." "I knew she was perfect for you." "Yes, you've made that clear," Blake said dryly. "Did you need something specific, or did you just come to gloat? Can a mother check on her son?" When Blake gave her a skeptical look, she continued, "Fine. I'm hosting a charity gala next weekend for the Children's Hospital. I want you and Sophia to attend." Blake hesitated. He and Sophia had been keeping their relationship relatively private. A high-profile charity gala would change that. "I'll have to ask her," he said finally. "Do that," his mother replied, standing. "And Blake, I really am happy for you. Sophia is lovely." After his mother left, Blake called Sophia, who was in court for the day. He left a message asking her to call him back when she could. Hours later, his phone rang. "Sorry I missed your call," Sophia said. "Court ran late, then I had a client meeting." "What's up?" Blake explained his mother's request. "It's completely fine if you don't want to go," he added quickly. "These events can be tedious and my mother can be overwhelming." "A charity gala, huh?" Sophia sounded thoughtful. "Actually, the foundation was invited to that event. I was planning to attend anyway, representing Glendale." "Really?" Blake was surprised. "Your mother heads the hospital board, Blake. Of course we were invited." He could hear the amusement in her voice. "So yes, I'll go with you. It'll be nice to have a handsome escort for once." "Great," Blake said, relieved. "I'll pick you up at 7 next Saturday." The week passed quickly, with both of them busy with work. They managed a quick dinner midweek, but otherwise communicated mainly by text and phone calls. Blake was surprised by how much he missed seeing Sophia, how often he found himself thinking about her during meetings or while reviewing reports. On Saturday evening, Blake arrived at Sophia's apartment precisely at 7. When she opened the door, he momentarily lost the ability to speak. She wore a deep emerald gown that hugged her curves before flowing to the floor. Her hair was swept up in an elegant style that emphasized her neck, and the simple diamond drops at her ears borrowed from a friend. She would later tell him, "You look." Blake searched for adequate words. "Breathtaking." Sophia smiled, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you. You're not so bad yourself." Blake offered his arm. "Shall we?" The gala was being held at the city's most prestigious hotel. When they arrived, photographers lined the entrance, capturing images of the wealthy donors and celebrities in attendance. Blake felt Sophia tense slightly beside him as they passed through the gauntlet. "Okay," he asked quietly. "Fine," she assured him. "Just not used to the flashbulbs." Inside, the ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland with crystal decorations and white flowers everywhere. Eleanor spotted them immediately, making her way across the room with determination. "Blake, darling," she said, kissing his cheek before turning to Sophia. "And Sophia, you look magnificent. That color is perfect on you." "Thank you, Mrs. Turner," Sophia replied with a warm smile. "The decorations are stunning. You've outdone yourself." "Eleanor, please," his mother insisted. "And thank you. We're hoping to raise $2 million tonight for the new pediatric research wing." She linked her arm through Sophia's. "Come, let me introduce you to some people." Before Blake could protest, his mother had whisked Sophia away, leaving him standing alone. He sighed and headed to the bar. This was going to be a long evening. Throughout the night, Blake watched as Sophia charmed everyone she met. She moved easily between conversations with wealthy donors and earnest discussions with hospital staff, genuinely interested in both. Even when cornered by notorious socialite gossips, she maintained her poise and grace. "Your young lady is quite impressive," a voice said beside him. Blake turned to find Edward Blackwell, one of his business associates, watching Sophia. "She is," Blake agreed. "Not the usual type you bring to these functions," Edward observed. Blake bristled slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Edward held up his hands placatingly. "Nothing negative. Just an observation. She seems more substantial." Before Blake could respond, Sophia appeared at his side, slipping her arm through his. "There you are. Your mother is about to start the auction. She requested we sit at the main table." Blake introduced her to Edward, who kissed her hand with old-fashioned courtesy. "Miss Grayson, I've heard wonderful things about your work with the Glendale Foundation," Edward said. "My wife serves on the board of a similar organization in Boston." "The Lawrence Foundation?" Sophia asked. "They do excellent work. We've collaborated on several initiatives." Edward looked impressed. "Indeed. Perhaps we could discuss potential partnerships sometime." "I'd like that," Sophia said genuinely. As they made their way to their table, Blake squeezed Sophia's hand. "You're amazing, you know that?" "What do you mean?" "You just secured a potential $1 million donor for your foundation in a 30-second conversation," Blake explained. "Edward Blackwell doesn't impress easily." Sophia shrugged. "I was just being polite." "You were being brilliant," Blake corrected, pulling out her chair. The auction was successful, with Blake himself bidding generously on several items. When the dancing began, he led Sophia to the floor, holding her close as they swayed to the music. "Having fun?" he asked. "More than I expected," she admitted. "Your mother is a force of nature, but I like her." "She likes you too," Blake said. "Which is rare. She's usually convinced no woman is good enough for her precious son." Sophia laughed softly. "Well, she did pick me, so clearly she has excellent taste." As they danced, Blake became increasingly aware of how right it felt to hold Sophia in his arms. They fit together perfectly, moved in sync without effort. When she rested her head against his shoulder, he felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. Later that night, as they stood outside Sophia's apartment, Blake found himself reluctant to leave. "Would you like to come in for a nightcap?" Sophia asked, as if reading his thoughts. Blake nodded, following her into the modest apartment. It was small but warmly decorated, with bookshelves lining one wall and comfortable furniture arranged to make the most of the space. A keyboard sat in one corner, sheet music neatly stacked beside it. "It's not a penthouse," Sophia said, seeming slightly self-conscious as she slipped off her heels. "It's perfect," Blake replied honestly. "It feels like you." Sophia smiled, disappearing into the kitchen to return with 2 glasses of whiskey. They sat on the sofa, Sophia tucking her feet beneath her as she sipped her drink. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a moment. "Anything." "Where do you see this going? Us, I mean." She looked down at her glass. "I'm not typically this forward, but I don't want to waste either of our time if we're looking for different things." Blake set his glass down and took her hand. "I see this going wherever you want it to go, Sophia." "I'm all in." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Really? Because my life isn't glamorous, Blake. I work long hours for causes I believe in. I don't attend galas every weekend or fly to Paris on a whim." "Do you think that matters to me?" Blake asked softly. "I think our worlds are very different," she replied. "And I think that can cause problems eventually." Blake moved closer, cupping her face in his hands. "I fell for you, not your lifestyle. I don't care if we eat at 5-star restaurants or that pizza place you love. I just want to be with you." Sophia's expression softened. I feel the same way, but I needed to hear you say it. Blake leaned in, kissing her with all the emotion he'd been holding back. Sophia responded immediately, setting aside her glass to wrap her arms around him. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent as months of building attraction ignited between them. When Blake's hands found the zipper of her gown, Sophia pulled back slightly. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Blake replied, his voice rough with desire. Sophia stood, taking his hand and leading him to her bedroom. What followed was a night of discovery and connection that left them both breathless and amazed. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay tangled together in Sophia's bed, Blake knew his life had irrevocably changed. Stay, Sophia whispered against his chest. Blake tightened his arms around her. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. In the morning, Blake woke to find Sophia watching him, her head propped on one hand. What? He asked, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing, she smiled. Just thinking how strange life is. A few months ago, I was dreading a blind date with some rich guy my boss's board member was pushing on me. And now I'm wondering if that rich guy wants breakfast because I'm starving. Blake laughed, pulling her down for a kiss. Breakfast sounds perfect. They spent the day together, neither wanting to break the spell of their newfound intimacy. They cooked breakfast, read the Sunday paper together, and took a long walk through Sophia's neighborhood. In the afternoon, they returned to Blake's penthouse to pick up a change of clothes for him, then spent the evening watching old movies on Sophia's small TV. It was the most ordinary day Blake had experienced in years and one of the happiest. Over the next few months, their relationship deepened. Blake found himself spending more nights at Sophia's apartment than his own penthouse, enjoying the coziness and warmth of her space. He reorganized his work schedule, delegating more responsibilities to his executive team so he could leave the office at reasonable hours. For Sophia's birthday in December, Blake wanted to do something special. He remembered her mentioning a dream vacation to Greece that she'd never had time to take. With the help of his assistant and a lot of secret planning, he arranged everything. On the evening of her birthday, he took her to dinner at the pizza place where they'd had their second date. This is perfect, Sophia said as they shared their usual large pizza. Simple and perfect. I have something for you, Blake said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. Happy birthday. Sophia opened it curiously, then gasped as she read the contents. Greece. For 2 weeks, she looked up, eyes wide. Blake, this is too much. Nothing is too much for you, he said simply. You've been working non-stop on that class action suit. You deserve a break, we both do. But 2 weeks. I can't just leave for, she stopped as she examined the dates. This is for June. 6 months from now, Blake nodded. I wanted to give you plenty of time to arrange things at work, and I thought, maybe we could make it special. 6 months feels like an important milestone. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. So you'll come with me. Of course I will, she said, leaning across the table to kiss him. Thank you. As winter turned to spring, Blake found himself thinking more and more about the future. He and Sophia had fallen into a comfortable routine, splitting their time between her apartment and his penthouse. They'd met each other's friends, attended work functions together, and even survived a weekend visit with Sophia's parents in their small hometown. Alina Turner had taken to inviting them to Sunday dinners, during which she not so subtly hinted about grandchildren. Blake would roll his eyes, but secretly, the idea of a family with Sophia had begun to take root in his mind. In April, just 2 months before their planned trip to Greece, Blake made a decision. He visited his family's longtime jeweler and selected a ring and emerald surrounded by diamonds, reminiscent of the gown Sophia had worn to that first gala. He kept the ring in his safe, waiting for the right moment. He planned to propose in Greece, perhaps on the island of Santorini as the sun set over the Aegean Sea, but life, as it often does, had other plans. One Tuesday evening in May, Blake arrived at Sophia's apartment to find her uncharacteristically quiet. They'd planned a simple dinner at home, but as Blake opened a bottle of wine, he noticed Sophia barely touched her glass. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern edging his voice. Sophia took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something." Blake felt a chill of apprehension. "That sounds serious." "It is." She met his eyes. "I've been offered a position as general counsel for the International Children's Rights Coalition." "Sophia, that's amazing," Blake said, genuinely pleased for her. He knew the ICRC was a prestigious organization that did important work worldwide. "When do you start?" Sophia bit her lip. "That's the thing. The position is based in Geneva." Blake's smile froze. "Switzerland?" "Yes." Sophia's voice was quiet. "It's an incredible opportunity, Blake, the kind that comes once in a career, if ever." "Of course it is," Blake agreed automatically, his mind racing. "When would you need to move?" "August 1st. She watched his face carefully. "I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to talk to you first." Blake set down his wine glass, trying to process this information. Geneva was over 4,000 miles away. Their relationship was barely 6 months old, but he knew how important Sophia's career was to her, how passionate she was about children's rights. "You have to take it," he said finally. Sophia's eyes widened. "Just like that, you don't want to discuss it." "What's to discuss? It's your dream job," Blake said. "I would never ask you to turn it down." "But what about us?" Sophia asked, her voice catching. "I don't want to lose what we have." Blake moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "Who says you have to?" "Blake, be realistic. Long-distance relationships are hard enough when it's a few hours' drive. We'd be talking different continents, different time zones." "I run an international shipping company," Blake reminded her. "I have offices all over Europe. I could work from Geneva regularly." Sophia looked skeptical. "You do that for you?" "Yes." Blake realized as he said it that he meant it completely. Or what? Blake hadn't planned to do this now like this. He'd imagined sunset in Santorini, not Sophia's living room on a Tuesday night. But suddenly, he knew there would never be a more important moment. "Or you could marry me," he said simply. Sophia stared at him. "What?" Blake slid off the sofa onto one knee, still holding her hands. "I don't have the ring with me, it's in my safe at home. This wasn't how I planned to do this. But Sophia, I love you. I've known since our second date that you were the one for me. Marry me. Come to Geneva as my wife and we'll figure out the rest together." Tears filled Sophia's eyes. "Blake, I know it's fast," he continued, "and I know it's not the romantic proposal you deserve. But I can't imagine my life without you, whether we're in New York or Geneva or on the moon." A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek. "You'd really move to Switzerland with me?" "I'd move anywhere with you," Blake said honestly. "I can run Turner shipping from anywhere with an internet connection. My executive team is solid. And maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe it's time for me to take that step back I considered years ago. Focus more on the foundation work, on building a life outside the office." Sophia launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him over. "Yes," she whispered against his neck. "Yes, I'll marry you." Blake held her tightly, relief and joy washing over him. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing and crying, he kissed her with all the love he felt. "I promise to get the ring tomorrow," he said. "It's beautiful, emerald like your eyes." "I don't care about the ring," Sophia insisted. "I just care about you." That night, as they lay in bed discussing their future, Blake felt a sense of peace he'd never experienced before. His life was about to change dramatically, but with Sophia by his side, he welcomed the change. The next morning, Blake went to his penthouse to retrieve the ring. When he returned to Sophia's apartment, he did the proposal properly down on one knee, ring box open to reveal the stunning emerald. "Sophia Grayson, will you marry me? For real this time with the ring and everything?" Sophia laughed through her tears as she nodded. "Yes, Blake Turner, for real this time." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and pulled her into his arms. Their trip to Greece in June became an engagement celebration. They spent 2 idyllic weeks exploring ancient ruins, swimming in crystal-clear waters, and making plans for their future. They decided on a small wedding in July before moving to Geneva together. When they returned to New York, they were met with both congratulations and concerns. Millionaire Turner was thrilled about the engagement but less enthusiastic about their move abroad. "Switzerland," she exclaimed when they told her. "But what about the company? What about my future grandchildren?" "The company will be fine, Mother," Blake assured her. "And as for grandchildren, they have excellent health care in Switzerland." Sophia's parents were supportive but worried about the whirlwind nature of the relationship. "You've only known him 6 months, her mother pointed out during a phone call. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Sophia replied, catching Blake's eye across the room and smiling. The wedding was held in the garden of Blake's family estate outside the city. Only 50 guests attended, close friends and family who watched as Blake and Sophia exchanged vows under an arch of white roses. Sophia wore a simple silk gown that made Blake's breath catch when he first saw her walking toward him. "I love you," he whispered as she reached him. "I love you too," she whispered back. "More than I thought possible." Their honeymoon was brief, just a weekend at a luxury resort upstate as they needed to prepare for their move. Blake had arranged for a beautiful apartment in Geneva, close to both Sophia's new office and a co-working space he planned to use. In late July, just weeks after their wedding, they boarded a private jet, Blake's one concession to luxury for the move, bound for their new life in Switzerland. As the plane took off, Sophia squeezed Blake's hand. "Having second thoughts?" she asked, only half joking. Blake brought her hand to his lips, kissing the wedding band that now sat beside her engagement ring. "Not one." "You," Sophia shook her head, leaning against his shoulder. "This is just the beginning, isn't it? Of everything," Blake agreed, putting his arm around her. "The best is yet to come." And as the city disappeared beneath them, Blake reflected on the blind date he'd so reluctantly agreed to nearly a year ago. His mother had been right all along, though he would never give her the satisfaction of admitting it. Some things were worth swallowing your pride for, and Sophia Grayson now, Sophia Turner, was definitely one of them. 1 year later, Blake stood on the balcony of their Geneva apartment, watching the sunrise over Lake Geneva. Behind him, he could hear Sophia moving around the kitchen, the soft domestic sounds he'd come to cherish. The past year had brought changes neither of them could have anticipated. Sophia had excelled in her role at the ICRC, quickly becoming an essential part of their leadership team. Blake had indeed stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Turner Shipping, focusing instead on strategic direction and expanding the company's charitable foundation. He'd also discovered an unexpected passion for teaching, accepting a position as a guest lecturer at the University of Geneva's Business School. Sharing his knowledge with eager students had become one of the highlights of his week. "Coffee?" Sophia asked, joining him on the balcony. At 7 months pregnant, she moved more slowly now, one hand supporting her back as she handed him a steaming mug. "Thank you," Blake said, taking the coffee with one hand and wrapping his other arm around her. He placed a gentle kiss on her temple, then another on her rounded belly. "How are my girls this morning?" "Active," Sophia replied with a tired smile. "Your daughter seems to think 3 a.m. is the perfect time for gymnastics." Blake chuckled, feeling the baby kick against his palm. They'd learned they were expecting just 3 months after moving to Geneva, an unexpected but joyous surprise that had cemented their new life together. "Mother called last night while you were in the shower," Blake mentioned. "She's already booked her ticket to be here when the baby comes." Sophia groaned good-naturedly. 2 weeks with your mother, just what every woman wants while recovering from childbirth. "She means well," Blake defended, though he shared Sophia's concerns about his mother's extended visit, and she did offer to hire a night nurse. "We don't need a night nurse," Sophia insisted, as she had each time Millionaire suggested it. "We'll manage." Blake smiled at her stubbornness, one of the many qualities he loved about his wife. "Whatever you want." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the city came to life below them. Blake marveled, not for the first time, at how dramatically his life had changed in just 18 months. From reluctant blind date to husband and soon-to-be father, all because his mother had refused to take no for an answer. "What are you thinking about?" Sophia asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "That I need to send my mother a really extravagant birthday gift this year," Blake replied honestly. Sophia laughed, the sound still his favorite in the world. "I think giving her a granddaughter might be enough." "True," Blake agreed, placing his hand once more on Sophia's belly. "Though I maintain that naming the baby Millionaire as a middle name is overkill." "It's tradition to honor grandmothers," Sophia reminded him. "And besides, your mother did bring us together." "Charlotte Millionaire Turner has a nice ring to it." Blake couldn't argue with that logic. "You're right, as usual." "I'm always right," Sophia said with a smile. "The sooner you accept that, the easier our marriage will be." Blake laughed, pulling her closer. "I accepted it the night of our second date, when you insisted that Marco's had the best pizza in the city." "And was I right?" "Completely," Blake admitted. "About the pizza and about everything else that matters." As the morning sun bathed them in golden light, Blake reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a blind date, he tried to avoid to the family they were building together. It hadn't been the life he'd planned, but it was infinitely better than anything he could have imagined. And it had all started with his mother's meddling and a reservation at Celestial proof that sometimes, just sometimes, mothers really did know best.